Your cerebrum also contains what we refer to as your general interpretive areas. Okay. These receive information from all of your sensory regions to help you create memories. Okay. So you know that there are certain smells and tastes and things that you associated with certain memories. Okay, so maybe chocolate chip cookies remind you of your grandma because she always made you chocolate chip cookies when you came to visit. So you see chocolate chip cookies, you think of grandma. You smell chocolate chip cookies, you think of grandma. Okay. We have one region in particular, call this your Wernicke's area, in your left hemisphere specifically. All right, so your right hemisphere kind of gets left out. Your left hemisphere, your Wernicke's area, this is where we do language, it's hard to say, language interpretation and your understanding of that language interpretation. So here's your Wernicke's area. Okay. Now, if you damage Wernicke's area, you are unable to interpret what you're looking at or what you're hearing, okay, collectively. Although you can understand individual words, okay, but you cannot put together those individual words to make coherent, like, thoughts, right? You're unable to interpret, like, sentences and paragraphs and pages out of a book, but you're like, oh, cat, okay, cool, cat, all right, but you can't, it doesn't really make sense. You're unable to interpret, like, the cat chased the mouse, okay? Individual words, yes. Interpreting the overall language, the overall composition, not so much. All right, you also have an area for speech. We call this Broca's area, also in your left hemisphere. Okay, your right hemisphere, I don't really know why your right hemisphere isn't quite as, I don't want to say important, because it is important, but it kind of gets left out with some of this stuff. Your Broca's area helps you with speech production. Okay, so these speech areas help you coordinate your breathing and assist with vocalization required for speech. So if you damage your Broca's area, okay, you can make sounds, but you can't really make words anymore. Okay, so this is a common region where people will experience a stroke. They damage this Broca's area. If that happens, they now suffer from, or they could now suffer from, something called Broca's aphasia. So they can make, like, noises, but again, they can't really talk. Okay, so not to be offensive, but sometimes it sounds more like animal noises almost, or like noises like a baby or something would make, because again, like, they just can no longer produce real words. Okay, they can no longer speak like they used to be able to do. Okay. All right, your prefrontal cortex. All right, very, very, very front portion of your giant noodle. All right. This helps you coordinate information from all your association areas, so we can collectively do all kinds of good human things. This is where your personality comes from, your decorum or your manners, even your toilet training. Okay, so we go potty in the potty. Okay, this is obviously in your frontal lobe, like the very, very front of your frontal lobe. If you damage this region, you could potentially be a brand new person, and not necessarily in a good way. Okay, people that suffer from prefrontal cortex damage often experience changes in their personality, their manners. They could actually end up losing the ability, or forgetting how to, potty in the potty, things like that. This person, his name was Phineas Gage. This represents the railroad spike that went through his head as he worked on the railroad a long time ago. Before this terrible accident, like, first of all, it's kind of amazing he didn't die, because this was in like the 18-somethings, right? Y'all know medical care wasn't all that great back in the 18-whatevers anyway, but he didn't die. He was, however, a pretty much different person. Okay, so before this accident happened, they said he was just very nice, very personable, very hardworking, things like that. Unfortunately, after the accident, he had some major personality changes. He wasn't quite as nice, easily angered, wasn't quite as hardworking, things like that. Which, I mean, I feel like, a railroad spike through your head, maybe we give him a little bit of a break, but that is really ultimately due to the damage to that prefrontal cortex. Okay. He did lose an eye, but, he didn't die. All right. So we've talked a lot about very particular regions of your cerebrum, and we've even kind of briefly mentioned that, specifically on the last slide, we mentioned like, oh, Wernicke's is in the left hemisphere, oh, Broca's is in the left hemisphere, and I keep saying, oh, the right hemisphere seems to be kind of shortchanged, but your, your right hemisphere, we've got lots of things going on in your right hemisphere as well. But the idea that some things that happen on your left brain or some things that your left brain is responsible for, we're not necessarily going to see those same things on the right portion of your brain, and vice versa. Okay, so your right brain, let me find an example. Here we go. Spatial visualization and analysis. Ooh, okay. Happens in the right side of your brain, right side of your cerebral hemisphere. Doesn't happen in the left side. Just kind of is what it is. Speech center, remember that Broca's area was in the left hemisphere, not seeing that in the right hemisphere. Okay, this is called lateralization. Okay, so each of the hemispheres can do things that the other hemisphere can't. Okay, now some things are bilateral. So we have an auditory cortex on both the left and the right. Okay. Because you have two ears, so why not, right? Same thing with visual cortex. You've got a left and a right for your two eyeballs. Okay. But not everything is shared. Cerebral dominance is the idea that one of your hemispheres is quote-unquote more dominant than the other. Okay. So a lot of people say they're left-brained or they're right-brained. That's okay. Your left hemisphere, for most people, is usually dominant. Okay, and again, that's a generalization. Most people, not everybody. Okay, this controls your reading, your writing, your speech, your language, your math, your logic. Okay, your right hemisphere controls, again, your visual spatial skills, emotions, intuition, spontaneity, artistic skills, lots of just other types of skills. Okay, now most people aren't exclusively one or the other. They're not exclusively left brain, right brain. Okay, we might favor one. We might have a little bit more dominance of one versus the other, but a lot of times people will be good at reading and writing, but they're just not very good at math. And that's okay. They could be good at reading and writing and just be really artistic. And that's okay. All right, and vice versa. You could be very emotional, very intuitive, but you could be good at math. Well, that's okay too. Okay. Again, these are just really generalizations. Now, your limbic system, okay. Your limbic system is located beneath the cerebral cortex, okay, and includes a couple of regions that we'll mention kind of here and there, but collectively, we've got your hippocampus, your amygdala, your thalamus, and your hypothalamus, okay, so we kind of highlighted a couple of things here for us. Now, what is your good old limbic system for? This is where your emotions come from. Good ones and bad ones. Fear, anger, love, hate. Everything in between. Your motivation, or your lack thereof, Your learning, imagination, memory. Okay. The stimulation of your different senses can bring about some of those complex memories that we can create. So I mentioned earlier that perhaps chocolate chip cookies make you think of your grandma. So just smelling chocolate chip cookies could maybe take you back to one particular instance of where your grandma made you chocolate chip cookies, something like that. Okay. This also includes some of the basal nuclei within the brain that have control over some of your voluntary muscle actions as well. Okay. And then specifically the hippocampus is good for long-term memory storage and retrieval. Your amygdala specifically is involved in your fight or flight response. Okay, so your amygdala kind of tells you, oh, we should be scared of that. We should try to fight or flight, or that's really nothing to be scared of. Okay, so we don't maybe need to fight or flight. And then your diencephalon, both your thalamus and your hypothalamus. We're going to talk a good bit about those two parts of your diencephalon in a little bit more detail later, okay, and give them much more specific functions, but they are included here in the limbic system. And so basically what happens is you have sensory input from all of your senses, smell, vision, taste, hearing, all that good stuff. Your limbic system turns them into memories, tells you we need to show affection or rage, sorrow for things, pleasure, sexual interest, okay? Lots of different options, okay, for what we can do with the sensory input that we're using the limbic system for. All right, your cerebellum, okay? Your cerebellum sits right up underneath your cerebrum, so posterior, okay? I kind of think it looks like almost like a walnut or something. Okay. This is separated from the brain itself by the fourth ventricle. So we've got another space for cerebral spinal fluid, CSF. Now your fourth ventricle, you really got to kind of look way down deep in here, because it's not very big. Okay, it's this little region here, and we've got our real picture here. So picture this in real life containing cerebrospinal fluid. Okay. So technically we have two halves. We have cerebellar hemispheres, left and right. And we connect these in the middle by what's called the vermis. I mean, you can't really see that here because we just chopped it in half, so this is only one hemisphere. The outer portion is gray matter. The inner portion is white matter. And it's arranged in a fashion that almost looks like a tree with branches. And so we call it the arbor vitae, the tree of life. Ooh, I know, fancy science terms, y'all. What good is your cerebellum? It helps integrate information coming from your inner ear and help with coordinated muscle movements, the voluntary muscle movements. Okay. So this helps us plan and initiate voluntary muscle movements. It helps with limb position. It also helps with the touch and pressure sensations. It helps you maintain your posture. It even helps coordinate your eye movements. Okay, and it also helps with maintaining your overall balance, okay, which again, your limbs, right, so like your arms specifically when they swing and we walk, it kind of helps us maintain our balance as well, right? So cerebellum coordinating voluntary muscle movement really helps us smooth out our movements so we don't have these really jerky movements on a regular basis.